There's people who listen and actively listen. And then there's people who don't listen, they just wait to talk. They ask a question and immediately are thinking about formulating the next response. If you Google the Chinese symbol for listening, the loose translation is that the ear is king, but only with an open heart and undivided attention. There is an art to listening. It's not just something that comes naturally to people. Welcome back to another episode of RecTalk. I'm your host, Nitin Sharma, founder and CEO of RecTools.io. RecTools, for those of you who don't know, is the only whole-of-market directory for your recruitment agency, your talent acquisition team, or your direct hiring business. If you're looking for new suppliers to help you reach out to more candidates, to attract more candidates into your business, to boost your visibility and your branding, to automate some of your recruitment processes or anything else in between, head to RecTools.io, free for you guys to use today, tomorrow, and forever. This is another solo episode that's been requested by quite a few of you, actually, in terms of wanting some more information around something I talk about quite a lot, which is around the psychology of sales. I'm very fortunate in that, as I always say, I get to spend a lot of time with guests who really know their stuff, and some of the best L&D trainers from around the world. And in addition to that, I've worked in sales and ran a recruitment agency for many, many years, and you pick up a few things along the way. And psychology of sales is something that I did a lot of work on. I've actually done a lot of presentations and team training exercises and a bit of coaching on as well in the past. So I'm hoping this episode is useful for you in understanding the psyche behind a sales process and why people interact in the way that they do and why people make buying decisions in the manner in which they do. The first thing to kick things off, I will caveat with is business development and sales are not the same thing. Sales is a part of the business development process, but to have a fully functioning and successful business development process within your recruitment agency or your business in general, you've got to understand that actually business development means more than just sales activity. Sales is a part of that, just as important as marketing is a part of your business development activity, as is visibility, as is running seminars and events and so on and so forth. But for the purposes of this episode, we're going to specifically talk about sales and the psychology behind sales. So we'll kick things off. I'm going to be referring to a presentation in front of me here that you can't see on camera, which is one I delivered actually. I can't believe it. This was 14 years ago. I delivered this presentation to a sales team that I was involved in sort of training and developing. But more than that, actually, this then got rolled out sort of company-wide. So I'd like to think that it did hit home for a lot of people, and I'm hoping you get some value out of it. So we'll kick things off with what we already know about sales. The things that we're already taught, or that we know from sort of when we were juniors, right? Things like the open questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Or the 5 bums on a rugby post is what some people call it. We know about open questions, closed questions, and probing questions, and sort of the funnel that you can take people down to then close them with, assumptive closes and optional closes and so on and so forth. We know about things like a mapped out sales process. We know about body language. We know about features, advantages, and benefits. We know about customer centricity. We know about following the discover, evaluate, purchase, and support sales model. That's not really what this episode is going to be about. We're going to go a lot deeper than that. So if those are things that you are still trying to get your head around, still trying to understand, I would suggest that you do some reading up on and research on those things before this episode continues for you. I want to kick things off. There are going to be there's 10 rules effectively of the psychology of sales, which is what I'm eventually going to get onto. But before we get to that point, there's 2 key things I think you need to understand about humans and behavior before the psychology of the sales part starts to make more sense. And the first thing is something called critical filters. So a critical filter is, we call them barriers, try and talk to somebody about something that you're trying to sell them and a barrier comes up, right? Critical filters are something that we all have. They lie in our sort of conscious and in our subconscious mind, right? Effectively, it's the gatekeeper that controls the flow of information from the subconscious to the conscious, right? And the information flowing from the conscious mind, that's evaluated within that critical filter. And then a decision's made as to whether or not we're going to accept it or reject it, right? So to give you an example, you walk through a shopping centre and you see somebody stood, with an energy company banner and clothing and so on and so forth, and they make eye contact with you. Immediately, the majority of our critical filters will shoot up straight away. I know what this is going to happen. This guy's going to try and sell me some sort of energy provider, and I don't want to know. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to say, so you start formulating that response in your head. I'm already with you. I've only just sorted it out. It's not something I'm interested in. I'm really late for a meeting. None of which might be true. You might just be saying, look, do you know what? I'm just browsing around today and I really didn't fancy talking about my energy. But we don't give people the courtesy of doing that. What we do is we throw up the critical filter. In our world, in the recruitment world, the critical filters that you will hear all the time are: we only work with agencies on our PSL. We don't have agencies that we use. We don't work with agencies. We're not looking to add people to our PSL. We've just renewed our PSL. A range of other things, right? We're at interview already, and you know they're not. Or that the role hasn't gone out to agency, and you know it has. And the immediate human response as a recruiter to hear that is to kind of be like, why are you bullshitting me for? That's not true. I know that's not true. I'm armed with information here. I've done research. I know that's not true. But we accept it and go, oh, okay, yeah. And when is your PSL going to be renewed? When can I send you some information? Can I send you an email? And let's be realistic about this. How many times do you think a talent acquisition team leader or manager or decision maker within HR has said, right, we're adding to our PSL, we've decided we want to renew it. Let's go through that inbox of all the agencies that introduced themselves to us and let's get in touch with them and give them an opportunity. No, you're not. That's not how it works. Let's be honest. That is not how it works, right? So you don't sit there. We're not bookmarking adverts that we see and think, oh, that's interesting, but I'm not looking right now. But I'll bookmark that. And I'll come back to it when I am looking to renew my car insurance, when I am looking to buy, a new bicycle, or actually, no, do you know what? I'm not looking at changing my energy provider at the minute, but let me take your details down. Let me take your card and I'll put it in my Rolodex at home, and I'll call you when I am looking at changing. No, that doesn't happen. Yet for some reason, we allow people's critical filters to almost bullshit us into believing that what they're saying is true, and we know it's not true, and they know it's not true. So critical filters are something that you really need to understand, because these are objections, they are smoke screens, they're not actual objections, they're not the truth, basically. These are things that are built up over time, and over time, the filter shoots straight up, and what you've got to do is figure out a way to get either around that filter or through that filter. And sometimes that's disarming them with honesty, sometimes that's challenging them, and sometimes that's just going, actually, do you know what? This approach isn't going to work. I need to do something different. I need to try something different. Worth thinking about. There's lots of different ways to do it, and we can do an episode on that in the future if you wish to. But for the time being, I'm going to leave critical filters there because I think that's a good starting point. The next thing to consider is the concept behind consultant or advisor, what makes a great consultant and great advisor. And there's a whole host of different things that if you think about the top billers or you think about the most successful people in recruitment that you know, there'll be certain traits that they have. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you need to be up at 5 a.m, taking a fucking ice bath and doing this, that and the other, and eating more vegetables and eating clean and not drinking as much and all the rest of it, because that's not what makes a good consultant or a good advisor, in my opinion. I think the key to a successful career in sales was, and always will be the art of listening. And it is an art. I've said a few times on the podcast that there's people who listen and actually listen and actively listen. And then there's people who don't listen, they just wait to talk. They ask a question and immediately are thinking about formulating the next response, the next question to ask, or they've got a list of questions to get through. And that's all they're thinking about. That's all they're concerned with, right? And that must resonate with a lot of people. And I know it does, because every time I mention that on the podcast, I get messages saying, bang on, right? Here's a little thing that might be useful or helpful to you. If you Google the Chinese symbol for listening, or the art of listening, Chinese alphabet is incredibly complex, but also incredibly insightful in that how they formulate their words is they combine other words and other symbols that represent other words into a new word. And the one for listening has always sort of stood out to me. I got shown this nearly 20 years ago, and it's always stuck with me. There's essentially 5 parts to the art of listening by the Chinese symbol for listening. The first is the obvious one, ears, because you need that to hear, right? Alongside that, you've got eyes, so you need to see what's being said. Not just hear it, but you need to see what's being said. Mind, because you need to think about what's being said. Undivided focus or attention, which is just a line there. And then the final part is heart. Heart, as in you've got to have an empathy towards what it is that's being said. And all of that, the loose translation is that the ear is king, but only with an open heart and an undivided attention. That's the idea behind it. And I thought that was really fascinating. That stuck with me for 20 years. I'm hoping that some of you take that away as well, because there is an art to listening. That it's not just something that comes naturally to people. But when you can master the art of listening, the psychology of sales becomes really, really easy. So we'll move on to those rules now. So, rule number 1, people make decisions emotionally. I've said that so many times on the podcast, but it is true. Whether it's product, whether it's the price, whether it's the prestige of the product, there is an emotional hot button that sits in the middle of that. They decide to purchase based on a feeling, a need, or an emotion, not the logical thought process that we're all taught to believe that leads to a sale. Okay? What are the intangible benefits? What are the things that I'm interested in? Why should I buy this product, right, or service? What effectively it will always come down to is an emotional decision, which then leads on to rule number 2. People justify that emotional decision with the facts, not the other way around. Yet for some reason we feature bash and we fact drop. I am a specialist in my recruitment sector. I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm the best at what I do. We work with your competitors. I do this. We do this. None of that fucking matters, because they're going to make a decision to purchase from you on an emotional basis first. Then they'll justify that emotional decision with the facts. When they have to justify it, that might be to somebody else. A talent acquisition leader might have to go to their HR director and say, listen, we need to put this agency onto the PSL. Why? And they're not going to say, well, I actually really like the person. Or, you know what, no, they said this couple of things and I've seen a lot of their content on LinkedIn and actually I really enjoy what this person's about. No, they're not going to do that. They're then going to use that justification, those facts and figures to justify it. Well, they're a specialist in the market. They've got real deep candidate relationships. Some of the people that they've presented to me so far have been phenomenal. I really think that there's value in adding this person onto our PSL. That's how it goes. It doesn't go the other way around. You've got to win them over emotionally first. They make decisions based on emotions, rule number 1. Rule number 2 is they justify that emotion with the facts. Rule number 3, people are egocentric. Ego gets a bad rap. Everybody has an ego. Everybody has an ego. We all have egos. That's why we get up in the morning and we have a wash and we brush our hair and we brush our teeth and we trim our beards if it's applicable, or we go and get our nails done. That's why we put perfume on. It's not because we're like, I don't want other people to believe. Well, no, but even that's part of ego, I suppose. Everybody has an ego. People are like ego-driven and egocentric. But egocentric means it's centered around the ego or oneself, right? So we see the world in terms of how it relates to us personally. So what that means is it's the WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. You could business develop, call me, or sales call me, however you want to call it. You can ask for your 30 seconds, and finally I'll give you your 30 seconds. Go on then, and you start telling me that, listen, I've been working in recruitment for 25 years. I don't give a shit. What does that matter to me? Oh, I'm a specialist in my area of recruitment. I don't give a fuck. What does that matter to me? Oh no, we're the biggest agency in the local area, and we've got access to all the. I don't care. Your prospects don't care about any of these things that you're feature bashing. They don't care. Because there's no emotional decision there in the first place. And rule number 3, you're not thinking of the fact that actually these people are egocentric. They want to talk about themselves. What's in it for me? Why should I allow you to run my recruitment process? Or why should I add you into the recruitment process? Why should I see your candidate? What's in it for me? And so if your pitch and your sales procedure and your sales pitch, your candidate pitch, whatever you want to call it, is centered around the benefits to that recruitment manager, that hiring manager, that business owner, that HR director, frame it in terms of what's in it for them. And what you'll find is their ego will take over and be like, well, actually, I am incredibly busy and I don't want to be going through 55 applications a day. And I don't want to be telling everybody no, because I don't really like being the bad person. And I don't want to triage a bunch of people on a telephone-based call because I've got a fucking job to do. I've got so much to do. And instead, I'm sitting here making this recruitment process happen. I hear the benefit. And then I'm going to buy into you emotionally because you've engaged with me, you've spoken to me, you've listened, you've actively listened, you've got around my critical filters, and you've justified those emotional decisions that I've created with some facts. I like it. Let's move ahead. Rule number 4. People look for value. People look for value in everything. Value is not just a number. Okay, so what I'm not saying is that people want a cheaper rate from you. That's stupid. You shouldn't be competing on rate, certainly not in this market. You know, it's not as though you've got an influx of vacancies where you can choose to drop your rates a little bit. In fact, you should be raising your rates right now, but that's a different conversation for a different day. People look for value, and value is not a fixed number. Value is relative to what you're selling, what others charge, what the prospect used to paying for, how badly the prospect needs your product or service, and the perceived value and the perceived difference between your offering and somebody else's. Value could be that you say, do you personally, or do your agencies currently personally reject every candidate that applies? Because we do. And I'll tell you why we do that. We do that because actually what we find is that there are incredibly good candidates that apply to work for businesses, get rejected out of a recruitment process, but then never actually apply there again, even though they could be absolutely phenomenal for a different role within the business. I'll tell you what we do. We do background checks and referrals and references. You know, we do a deep dive and we do an interview with the candidate with the notes there available, whatever it might be. You've got to think about, well, you hear the word value proposition all the time, but you genuinely have to think about your value proposition. Because if all you're offering is a cut and paste recruitment service that was taught to you at Robert Half, Robert Walters, you know, Michael Page, Hayes, Reed, and now you're running your own recruitment business and you're doing the same thing. Well, what the heck is why am I using you? What's the point? Where's the value for me? I may as well just use them. I'm not getting anything out of this. People look for value. Always put value first. Not process, not, you know, the delivery or the, you know, it doesn't have to be a price-based value thing either. You know, price is always an objection in the absence of value. Create that value. That's I think one of the more important rules of the psychology of sales. Rule number 5, people think in terms of people. I'll say that again. People think in terms of people. The human brain, it's not a calculator, it's not a computer or an information processor. You know, it's we know, and it's proven by research and so on and so forth, that our brain's primary function is to deal with social interactions, okay? Think about this from the perspective of when you're in school or you're teaching a young child. You know, Billy has 3 apples, Johnny has 4 apples. If they combine their apples together, how many apples do they have? That is how the human brain works. We can't take. There's a lot of people that struggle to then rewind that or read a mathematical problem like that and put that into, oh, well, that's your 3 + 4. People think in terms of people. So your prospects are always going to interact better with you when you are using names and places, real life examples. We work with your competitors. Of course you do. Bullshit. We work with X, Y, and Z company. In fact, we work with Charles at XYZ company and Louise at this company, who I know used to work for you guys. Yeah, we do some work with her as well. I'm currently talking to, Rita at this other company. And I know that these guys are hot on your tail at the minute, or they are launching a product into your service market soon. I know my market, but I can say I know my market and you won't believe me. But if I put it in terms of people and names and places, competitors, facts, figures, value, all of these things start to present you as a genuine option of somebody to work with. Rule number 6 of the psychology of sales, I genuinely believe this now. This is probably one of the most important ones and I used to spend a lot of time with sales leaders, kind of really drumming this one into people, because we sometimes lose sight of the fact that rule number 6 is real straightforward. You can't force people to do anything. When people buy, it's not because you've wielded some magical power over them. Look, you can urge, you can push, you can entice, but ultimately people are going to do what they want to do. They're going to do what they want to do. And you have to accept that. You have to. You cannot force somebody to do anything. People are only ever going to do what they want to do. And when you can accept that, the psychology of sales becomes so much easier, because you're then not beating yourself up over stupid things. You can look back at a process, you can look back at a conversation and identify the places where you could have improved and could have done something differently. But ultimately, you'll never force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. Rule number 7, and this applies very much so in our industry, because it's been operated for so long as a sales industry and sales businesses and all that bullshit. Psychology of sales, rule number 7 is people are naturally suspicious. Sucker born every minute. Most people are moderately skeptical of any offer. People seek to avoid risk. You can never predict the level of suspicion that any particular person has, right? So it's usually best to back up any claims that you've got with some evidence, testimonials, survey results, authoritative endorsements, scientific data, whatever it might be. What I mean is, when you're on the phone to a candidate who you're trying to headhunt, for example, that's sales too, and you're like, oh yeah, we've got this role and we've got this, and I'm working with this client, I'm working with that client. 9 out of 10 times, they're generally going to be naturally suspicious of what you're saying. Oh, you're just saying that. You'll just say, oh, you're really, really suitable for this position. Well, I bet you tell everybody that just to get their CV over the line. Think about that. The psychology behind that. If people are naturally suspicious all the time, then you need to be backing up statements that you are presenting as facts with backup evidence. You have to be. You've got to come with receipts. You have to come with receipts. And that's the only way that you're going to build that level of trust and the emotional connection that we talked about in step 1. Rule number 8, understand that your prospects are people and that people are always looking for something. We talk about things like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a good example actually of that. But whether it's love, wealth, glory, comfort, safety, people are naturally dissatisfied in their lives in some way, and they spend their lives searching for intangible dopamine hits, right? A good sales pitch is really just showing people how what you do fulfills a missing part of their life. We're not selling products, we're selling a service, we're selling people effectively. I hate saying that, but we're selling the opportunity to work with a business, we're selling people. So you got to understand that, listen, this person that you're speaking to, they have hopes and dreams and needs and requirements and ambitions. You can't just feature dump your way through. You can't. It's not going to work. You need to understand what motivates this person. What's missing in this person's life, career, opportunity. Why is this recruitment process such a pain for them? What is it that you can offer them that they don't already have or get from their current supplier or their current process? What should they deal with you? And that sounds incredibly difficult to do, but from a psychological perspective, that's how people are making these decisions. It's all well and good me saying, look, they buy emotionally based on emotions, and then they justify the emotions with the facts. All of this stuff is about finding those emotional needs. What is it that's missing? What is it that you're not happy with? Because you're entertaining a conversation which tells me that you're hoping that I say something or do something that gives you hope. So let me give you that hope. Rule number 9. People like to see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it before they buy it. Right? Pretty obvious, but is it? Because how many times do we make a business development call or make a sales call and say, yeah, I can fill that job for you, or I can fill that. I've got candidates for that. Have you? Go on then. Show me. Go with receipts. And if you haven't got a candidate, don't say you have got a candidate, because people are naturally suspicious, remember? If you haven't got the receipts and you haven't got somebody to present, and because people are naturally suspicious, give them other examples. Hey, this CMO position that you're recruiting for, I actually put this CMO into this role with this company. And I did that, and this was the process that I followed. So what you're now showing them in terms of the like to touch it, see it, taste it, smell it rule is, here's what I did for them, and that's therefore what I could do for you. Rather than going, I've got somebody ready to go. Make sense? And look, the final rule of the psychology of sales is that the most people will follow the crowd, right? Most of us are imitators. We look for guidance, especially when we're uncertain about something. What do others think about this? What do others feel about this? What do others do? And then we act accordingly, right? Most people operate in that way, whether we like to admit it or not. A crowd attracts a crowd. A busy restaurant will always remain busy. A quiet restaurant will often have a quiet day. People see a queue and they go and line up. What's this? What we're queuing up for? It happens. That's psychology. That's just how people interact, right? So this is where it then becomes really, really important for you to be constantly, considering that when you are in your sales conversations. Remember that people like to be, shown names and receipts and that kind of thing. Remember that people like to follow the crowd. Remember that people are always looking for something. Bundle all of that together, and what you've got is really the basis of a strong psychological sales conversation with your prospects. I'm going to wrap it up there. I welcome any questions, any follow-ups, anything you don't agree with. Listen, this, as I said, this presentation was delivered years ago, and I think it's still relevant and poignant today, even in the day and age that we're in. Probably more so, given the fact that how we buy and how we interact with our purchasing decisions has just continually evolved. I'm hoping this was useful. I'm hoping that you guys get some value out of this. I genuinely wish you all the best for the remainder of this year. I know it's a tough market out there, but keep going. And not only keep going, but do things differently. If it's not working, it hasn't worked so far, it's not going to carry on working. The market's not going to change. The world's not going to go back to the way it was. The good old days are good and gone. We're in the new age now, and you need to be doing stuff differently. But reach out to me if you want some advice. I do, I don't charge for coaching calls and, advice and that kind of thing. Catch me on a TRN webinar or a Team Network regional meetup. I'm often at all those things. Grab me, ask me any questions that you might have. But just, please do something different. Our industry is a fascinating industry, and it gets an incredibly bad rap. And I think that the power to change that is really within our hands. And yeah, so I shall wrap it up there. Thank you for watching, listening, subscribing, doing all the cool shit that you guys do to keep me being able to do this as a job. Thank you very much. We shall see you again next week or next episode, whatever that might fall. Ta-ra.